My name is Olivia Davis. A changed character name. I work at a bookstore in downtown Seattle, Washington. My job usually ends quite late, around 7 p.m., and I often walk home. The quickest way to my apartment is to cut through a large park on the west side of the city, called Greenwood Park. A changed name. Greenwood Park is quite beautiful during the day, with its old, shady trees and paved pathways. But at night, especially after the sun has completely set and the streetlights come on, it takes on a gloomy, silent appearance. The entire park seems to be covered by a thick darkness, with only flickering streaks of light from the streetlights and long, distorted shadows cast by the trees. On a fall evening in 2023, around 8 p.m., I was walking home as usual. It was completely dark, and the air was cool and damp. My thick coat was still not enough to ward off the chill. I walked a little faster, hoping to get home soon to relax after a tiring day at work. The park shortcut was my daily habit, although it was a little creepy to walk through the deserted paths and dark bushes. I was used to it. I thought I had nothing to fear. The walking path in the park was almost empty at this time. Only the sound of my footsteps echoed on the dry leaves, and the rustling of the wind through the foliage. At that moment, I had no idea that my familiar park shortcut was about to become the path that would lead me into a horror I would never forget. The crying in the dark park was about to echo, and it would change my life forever. I was halfway through Greenwood Park. The walking path wound through dense bushes, where the streetlight could barely penetrate. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed, cutting through the stillness of the night. Crying, the crying of a child. A weak, choked cry, as if the child was trying to hold it back but couldn't. I stopped abruptly. My heart pounded. A child? In the park at this hour? Someone might have abandoned the baby. Or the child was lost? I looked around. The entire park was enveloped in darkness. No one, not a soul. The crying continued, faint, but clear. I tried to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It wasn't from the ground. It wasn't from in front of or behind me. It seemed to be coming from another direction. I took a few more steps, trying to listen more clearly. The crying sounded distressed, mournful. No one passed by. I was the only one here. And I was the only one who heard that crying. A chill ran down my spine. Something was wrong. Why was a child crying here at this hour? And why couldn't I see anyone? I stood still, listening carefully. The crying echoed again, a little clearer this time. It sounded like sobbing, full of fear. I felt a strange urge. I wanted to help that child. I couldn't leave a child crying in the dark like this. I followed the direction of the sound, and what I was about to find was not a lost child, but something far more terrifying. The crying from somewhere led me to an unbelievable truth, and it would haunt me for the rest of my life. The child's crying became clearer and clearer. It sounded so distressed, full of despair. I decided to follow that sound. I turned onto a small, less traveled trail, leading deeper into the dense, bushy area of the park. The darkness became increasingly thick. The faint streetlights could no longer reach here. Only the dim moonlight filtered through the foliage, creating weak streaks of light. The crying echoed again. This time, I was sure it wasn't from the ground. It wasn't from a bush. It was coming from above. From a tree. I looked up. There was a large tree, with a gnarled trunk and dense foliage. Standing tall in the middle of the trail, its shadow stretched long, engulfing everything around it. I approached the tree. The closer I got, the clearer the crying became. It sounded like sobbing, mixed with whimpers. And then, I saw, on a rather large branch, at a height of about 3 meters, there was something, a white figure, blurry, but clear, a white dress, and it seemed that on that white dress, there were large, dark red stains. I held my breath. My heart pounded as if it wanted to burst from my chest. This wasn't a lost child. This wasn't a prank. I slowly moved closer to the tree, my eyes fixed on the white figure on the branch. The faint light from a distance seemed to shine on it, making the white figure stand out even more in the darkness. The crying still echoed, faint, but full of lament. And then, I saw more clearly. It was a woman, wearing a white dress. She was sitting on the tree branch, in a strange posture, and she was holding a baby in her arms. Light on the branch. That crying led me to a sight I will never forget. True fear began at that moment. Because I knew it wasn't a real person. I stood at the base of the tree, looking up. The faint light from a distance and a bit of moonlight shining down were enough for me to see the horrifying scene on the branch more clearly. It was a woman, long, dark, tangled hair, falling over and obscuring part of her face. Her face was terrifyingly pale, almost translucent in the darkness. And the most horrifying thing was her white dress. Her entire white dress, especially the chest and stomach area, was stained with blood, dark red, dried blood stains, forming haunting, mottled patches. She was holding a baby in her arms. The baby was still, unmoving. Its small face was pressed against its mother's shoulder, so I couldn't see it clearly. But I felt a terrifying stillness from it. The child's crying still echoed. But strangely, it wasn't coming from the baby in her arms. The crying seemed to emanate from the woman herself, or from thin air. It was not the cry of a living child. That woman's eyes, I couldn't clearly see the color of her eyes, but I felt them to be deep black, lifeless, like 2 dark holes staring down at me. A gruesome sight. A woman in a blood-stained white dress, holding a dead child, sitting on a tree branch, and emitting the mournful cry of a baby. I stood there, frozen. My entire body trembled. A bone-chilling cold ran down my spine, piercing straight to my marrow. It can't be real, I told myself. This is a dream, a hallucination. But the crying still echoed, pulling me back to the horrifying reality. Her gaze, even if it was just a fleeting glance in the darkness, I felt as if those deadly eyes were looking straight at me. Penetrating to my bones, a deep despair, a profound pain, and a searing hatred radiated from that ghost. I couldn't take it anymore. A terrifying scream escaped my throat. I couldn't keep calm. I couldn't stand there for another second. The gruesome sight on the branch had made me break down, and I knew I had to run. Immediately, my terrifying scream echoed in the deserted park. Immediately, I turned around, not daring to look for another second. I ran frantically. Not thinking about where I was, only knowing to run fast, far away from that horrifying tree. My footsteps pounded on the paved path. My heart was beating wildly, as if it wanted to jump out of my chest. I felt a cold draft, some presence chasing behind me. The park seemed to stretch endlessly. The trees turned into giant specters, reaching out their long branches as if to grab me. Every rustle of the wind, every fallen dry leaf made me jump, turning my head back in fear. I didn't dare to look back. I was afraid that if I did, I would see the blood-stained girl in the white dress still sitting on the branch, her hollow black eyes staring straight at me. Or worse, she had gotten down from the tree and was crawling after me in the dark. Tears streamed down my face. My breath came in ragged gasps. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. But I didn't dare to stop. I ran through deserted paths, dark lawns. The baby's mournful cry still lingered in my head, like an unending horror soundtrack. Finally, after a long, drawn-out run in extreme fear, I saw the light of the main road leading home. I rushed out of the park, out of the enveloping darkness. I gulped down the outside air, trying to calm myself down. My legs trembled. I couldn't stand steady. My whole body was drenched in cold sweat. When I got to my apartment, I hastily fumbled with the key, opened the door, and slammed it shut. I locked all the bolts and pulled the curtains tightly. I was still very scared. The image of the blood-stained girl in the white dress and the baby on the branch kept replaying in my mind. The mournful cry still echoed in my ears. The invisible chase. Although no one was actually chasing me, fear had created an invisible chase in my mind. I huddled on the sofa, trying to calm my breathing, trying to shake off the horrifying images. But I knew I would never be able to forget what I saw in Greenwood Park on that fateful night. Greenwood Park was no longer my safe park shortcut. It had become a cursed place. And I had witnessed a part of that curse. Since that terrifying night, my life has completely changed. I cannot sleep peacefully. Every time I close my eyes, I see the pale face, hollow black eyes, and blood-stained white dress of the woman on the tree. The baby's mournful cry still haunts my dreams, and even when I'm awake, I no longer dare to walk home through the park. I have to take a longer, more time-consuming detour. But I'd rather endure that than face that horror again. The haunting from the park urged me to investigate. Who was that woman? What happened to her and the baby? Why were they trapped on that tree? I started searching for information about Greenwood Park, sifting through old online newspapers, local history forums, and even social media groups specializing in ghost stories or haunted locations in Seattle. The search was not easy. But finally, I found horrifying pieces of information. About 20 years ago, within the time frame you requested, a terrible murder occurred right in Greenwood Park. A young woman, named Sarah Evans, a changed name, and her small child, named Lily, a changed name, were brutally murdered. The police did not find their bodies immediately. One of the most chilling parts of the story was how they were found. Sarah and Lily's bodies were discovered on a large tree in the park, either hanging or trapped on a branch. The case was never fully solved, and the killer was never caught. There were descriptions that Sarah was wearing a white dress on the day she disappeared, and her body was covered in blood when found. Echoes from the past. That was the horrifying answer to what I had seen. The blood-stained woman in the white dress holding the baby on the tree was Sarah Evans and her daughter, Lily. They tragically died on the very tree where I saw them. Their suffering, anger, and yearning for justice had trapped their souls. Unable to find peace, The haunting from the park is now not just a ghost story. It is a real tragedy. An unresolved injustice. I still live in fear and obsession. I no longer dare to go near Greenwood Park at night. Whenever I pass by, I still feel a cold draft. An invisible presence. People who still walk through the park every evening are unaware of the tragedy that occurred. They don't know about the suffering spirits still lingering on that tree branch, emitting mournful cries. My story is a warning. Never underestimate strange sounds in the dark. You never know what tragedy has occurred where you are walking, and what spirits are still trapped, trying to express their pain. If you enjoyed true horror stories, or stories based on accounts and mysterious locations, like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the channel to follow our latest videos. We will bring you more terrifying and haunting stories. Thank you for listening.